Stage fright. But it's just totally natural. It's rolling, everyone's like, can't do it. What panel were you on Tuesday? Like you said this week, you were on a panel this week when you were slouching.
Yes.
That's a nice easy way to get into it.
I was slouching. I was getting very, very
I can feel already what I'm making.
very comfortable on the stage. Yeah, so I was down in Manchester. My brother and I drove down for, they're called Bloom North, and it's like a women's marketing community. And there was 4 of us on the panel, great moderator. It was called the Juggle Struggle.
The juggle struggle?
Yeah.
What's that?
So sort of the conversation of how many of us are surviving in our lives, how are we thriving, is there an easy way to get, well, there's clearly not an easy way to get between the two of them, but there is a way if you make a choice. And it was just a mix of different women on the panel. There was me talk a lot about bravery. There was a woman who focuses more on menopause, which is obviously something that a lot of women go through, or all women go through at a certain stage in their life. Women talk about nervous system, and then there was another woman who was chatting about how she just didn't realize that she was an anxious person until lockdown, when lockdown actually released all of her stress, because she realized that so much of her anxiety was about being around people.
What if she had like bottled up, or it just became?
It wasn't even bottled. It was just she wasn't even aware. You know what it's like when you are, oh, I'm Iona. Mm-hmm. I'm this way. This is the way that I move around the world, and she just didn't even realize that she was someone that just had this like low grade buzzing fear, like running her whole life. Yeah. So she was saying that lockdown, and I can relate to this too, because lockdown changed my life as well in a very positive way. But she was just saying that it gave her a real forced pause, like a real opportunity to be like, oh, I'm the person I thought I was and who I am right in this moment. I'm very relaxed right now, and I normally amn't, and it really forced clarity for her around how much of her life she was actually struggling in. So it was cool to hear her story.
It's like that change of environment forces you into like a different perspective and forces you into like analyse yourself, right? All of a sudden you're alone. You don't have that stuff to be like keep you busy or keep you distracted, whatever. Right. You're like quiet and you're like, oh.
Right. No. And we were just talking about this earlier, the gift sometimes of a real rock bottom, or the gift of, I mean, obviously you don't wish a traumatic life experience or illness or any, of course you don't wish it on anyone, but as someone who has had a rock bottom experience in my life that really, it forces clarity. It like forces you to choose your life all over again, and it's like it can be a gift.
Absolutely. I agree. I think like the challenges are put in front of you for a lesson in your life. It might be something that you're maybe not fully developed or not fully understanding within yourself. And I personally feel like all the challenges that I've had in life have been really hard, but they've been something that has pushed me or propelled me forward. So I absolutely agree with you in that it's something that you don't wish on someone.
No,
but when you go through something like that, it can be something that's eye-opening for who you are in yourself and how you interact with other people around you, and then how you wish to move forward with your life and what direction you want to take. I think you're right, the word is clarity on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a choice, like you said, bravery at the start of this. Like, it is such a brave thing to either, I mean, the easier choice is to go, this is really difficult, I'm going to myself away. And that's probably what most of us do, is you don't necessarily need to run away from things, but you can be, whether it's stressed at work or stressed in your relationship, it's easier to distract yourself with other things and just kind of leave it be. And it does fester inevitably. So you were talking about having low points or difficult times.
Yeah.
Was that something you consciously were like, actually I need to just meet this head on? Was it like, what was the motivation of what got you to that point?
Yeah, so I was one of those people who I would say had a really easy life, like a really nice childhood. There was nothing about my, middle class, lived in Newton Mearns, in a nice part of Glasgow. Had everything that you would need to be okay. But something that I struggled with from a very young age was this crushing feeling of the pressure to be perfect. Because from a very young age, I got a lot of feedback of Iona's so naturally talented, Iona's so gifted, she doesn't need to really work hard, things come easy to her. And so by the time I was weighing myself when I was 5, by the time I was 11, I was already like secretly binging and then starving. And it was all expertly hidden because I was also a very competitive field hockey player. And so it was weird because this whole hidden life that I had kind of drove and helped me excel as a high level athlete and like maintain being a straight A student and all this kind of stuff. And that followed me across the Atlantic because I got recruited to play field hockey in America, which is where I live now. And I was what I call like a highly functioning and visibly struggling person. So on the outside, strong game face, it's all looking good. And internally, just an absolute disaster. And just so little, it just felt like such a lonely place to be me.
Yeah.
And very hard to be me, and this feeling like no one would understand it. And it also was hard to compute because it felt like I had everything that you should have in order to be happy. But by the time I was 29, I'd been just on this roller coaster of, I never got formally diagnosed, but if I had been, it would definitely be like clinical depression and bulimia in exercise eating disorders. And I remember it so vividly because I would do every single week, I would binge about 10,000 calories in my room. It was kind of this almost like weekly tradition to release the pressure of being me. And I just had one of those days in my flat in Boston, and I got a call from my brother, Andrew, who lives here in Glasgow. And he said, Iona, you're going to be an aunt. And I just knew it was going to be a girl. And I'm having a girl next year, but I wasn't a mother at the time. But I just knew I didn't want her to know that version of me. Like I did not want her to know that version of me.
So that was the motivation.
And that was that moment of forced clarity. And again, would I wish 29 years of what I struggled with invisibly on anyone? No. But it forced such clarity in my life. And it's something that when I'm working with men and women, I say that, and there's someone in your life who needs a braver version of you to exist. So if you can't do it for yourself right now, I always ultimately hope that we can, like that we can do it for ourselves. But if you can't do it for yourself right now, someone in your life needs a braver version of you to exist. Who is that? Who is that person?
And that can resonate with anyone, right?
Anyone. And we've all got someone.
That was where how we became connected through Televerde, because you were part of this journey. You now speak on panels, you talk and you share your story, you share how you can help people kind of find that version of themselves, right? And last year at Women in the Channel, you met Alicia Rasta and Michelle Sirocco. What was that experience like for you?
It was I loved meeting them because, this was the biggest conference that I had spoken at, like flown over to Palm Springs. I live in Boston, so that's across the country. Managed to miss my first flight, but got there.
Story for another time.
Story for another time, so professional. But I made it there, and it was, first of all, I walked into where the conference was, and it said max capacity 650. I was like, you're fucking kidding me. Like, you are kidding me.
Kicking doors down.
Like, what? I had no idea that the conference was that size. And sometimes, I do my research, and sometimes I like to be selectively naive because would have really helped me. It was like definitely the biggest audience I'd spoken in front of. But I was like, all right, I'm going in. And it was cool because was the Women of the Channel, so there's a big focus on tech, AI. There's great speakers talking about those more technical aspects of the work that a lot of the women who go to that conference do. And then the Televerde talk came up. And it was so much more of a human experience perspective. And I think we forget, no, it's not that we don't forget it, it's just it's such an important part of all of us. It's like we go to our job and we have these titles, but we're human beings with history. And hearing their experience it's one of those moments where you realize none of us are that different.
Yeah.
So pretty much all of us have been through an experience in our life that maybe we'd like to forget. Or it's like, oh, I kind of wish that it hadn't had to be this way. But when you meet other people in your life who have been through something and really been through it, and one of my favorite Chinese proverbs is, you can only go halfway through the darkest forest and then you're coming out the other side. See the people who walk through that dark forest and are brave enough to keep going and find their way through, just gives you a depth and understanding. And then when you meet other people out in the world, like Alicia and Michelle, who have done that for themselves, and they're not just surviving in their life, they are like, they're thriving. And it's such a, I just love meeting people like that, because they're also the best stories.
Totally. And we spoke about this earlier on this morning about like that level of empathy. Like someone that's been through that journey and is kind of looking back on it now, like completely beyond coming out the other side, like going on, being highly successful, and then can kind of lead the way for others. And that's something that is important in your line of work as well, isn't it? Like bringing that level of understanding out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've found, maybe you can relate to this, is sometimes like the medium is the message. So someone could say to you, you need to be braver in your life. Someone in your life needs a braver version of you to exist. You need to do this for some other reason. But if it's coming from someone who you can feel like they've been through the muck of their life, like they've been on the floor, they've found a way to stand up, we're similar. Like we're more similar than we are, and you trust those people so much more than sort of empty platitudes or we're going to self-improve today.
I think people buy into experience and each other. So even if your story doesn't necessarily directly translate to somebody else, there's the feelings that you've had that make you a human being that will be relatable no matter what. Somebody has felt happy, somebody has felt sad, somebody has felt desperate. Everyone has an understanding of what that feels like to them. So when you're communicating a story, an experience, something that's happened in your life that you've had to pull yourself out of, it's an extremely powerful sort of experience for everyone in this sort of scenario. You know, it's great for you to be able to relive your own experience and see it continually through your life and look at different versions of yourself through that. But likewise with sharing that experience and then helping somebody else realize that they have that inner strength as well. It's extremely powerful.
Absolutely. I told you when I was in Perryville, and we sat down with some of the women that we work with and some of the mates for a round table. And the first thing I said to you was, no one prepared me for what a round table was, as these women shared their stories and everyone's like really emotional and stuff. But the commonality between all of them, and we spoke about this at lunch, was that everyone said I was in such a dark place. I felt completely broken. I didn't know where I was going, didn't have any direction. And after working with Televerde, the skills that they've learned and the experiences they had, every one of them spoke about their level of confidence in themselves as people, the amount of authority they feel they have, the amount of control they have on certain things in their life. And it's to see people go through that journey, it just resonates with what you've been saying of like, no matter where you start, there's always a version at the end of it when you're coming out of that forest and into the light.
Right. And you have to choose it. So no one can save you. And it's not that no one's coming to save you, because often the help is there. But you have to, in some way within yourself, find a way to step towards it and say, like, I am taking responsibility for my life. And that's a scary thing too, to say like, I am singularly responsible for my life. It's so much easier you can obviously, bad stuff happens. People do many, like so many people I've worked with, people have done stuff to them which is terrible and horrible, and you still have to be the one that saves yourself. And you can't stay in the place of I'm a victim to these life experiences, or even when you yourself have done stuff that you're not proud of. You have to be able to look that straight in the eye and say, like, I was this person, and also I'm not, it doesn't mean I deserve to suffer for the rest of my life. Like, there's a path towards feeling differently about myself. But it's that responsibility piece that we all have to take for our life, because no one can do it for you.
Absolutely, and I think what you were saying about there tends to always be people there to support you. It's how much are you willing to accept that help, and if you're not willing to accept it, it's essentially non-existent.
Right, it doesn't exist. Yeah.
So if you're not there to take accountability, like you're talking about, responsibility for your own life, your own actions, and kind of step forward and accept the help that's there on offer, you're going to stay in the same spot.
Yeah.
You have to have more clarity to be able to move forward in that situation.
Yeah. A brave thing, I talk a lot of, like, I define bravery as where your strength and vulnerability collides. And it's the vulnerable piece.
Yeah.
It's, I need help and I'm willing to accept it.
Yeah.
And not just accept it, I'm willing to work with it. Because help given in one direction is just, is help.
Yeah.
And you have to
Do some work too.
turn it into something. But it's a vulnerable thing. Like, even when you're feeling broken, lost, you can still, that's still a strong position, because it's a known position. It's familiar. You're used to feeling a particular way, and it's hard to conceive that there's a different reality for you.
Yeah. And you mentioned a story about, you said you've been working with the foundation recently.
Yeah.
And at the end of the course, we'll maybe start at the end, one of the women was just like, I was expecting this to just be total BS.
Yeah.
And what was the example you shared at the end?
Yeah. So I loved it. I had a month with the women who are in the past reentry program. I think there was about 35 women who I was working with, and we did a lot of connecting with the self and cutting cords with the past, practicing empathy, releasing shame, which a lot of we all hold shame for different reasons. And some of my favorite tools for that kind of thing, I don't know if you know, it's like inner child work, connecting with a younger version of yourself, breath work, visualization, all this kind of stuff. And we were wrapping up in our final call, and we're just reflecting on how the experience went, and one woman unmuted and said, I was not delighted why am I being made to do this, basically. And she said, but when you shared your story, not the same, obviously I've never been through the experience of being incarcerated, but I've been through the experience of being on the floor of my life and then having to choose it. And she's like, it made me trust you. And I was saying to her that it's like, the very thing that you perhaps feel the most shame about is the point of connection or permission. That's another thing I say a lot, is like, if you can offer people permission and relief, you've given them the biggest gift. So if you can give people the permission to, like, I can see something more for myself in my life, or the relief of I'm not alone, that's such a gift. But what she was saying was, it was like the experience of some of the stuff that we'd done together. She was feeling empathy towards herself that she hadn't felt before. She hasn't obviously lived with her daughter for a long. Her daughter's 11, and so she had a very clear someone that pulled her through that program. And when she was like, oh yeah, Iona's going to make me close my eyes and breathe, couldn't do it for her. Couldn't do it for herself in that moment, but was tethered enough to knowing that her daughter needs a braver version of her to exist. And she's like, I'm so glad that I stayed, like I found a way to stay, because now I've got these tools and I can use them. She's like, I use them every day. Like, I practice my breathing in my room. It's improved my relationship with my daughter. It makes me believe that when I'm out, I'm going to know how to hold myself through that experience. And it was a beautiful reminder for me as someone who, I've been facilitating breathwork experiences. I mean, I've done it for people who are incarcerated now. I've done it for people who are millionaires, and we're all the same. We're more the same than we are different. All human beings need the same thing. We need that relationship with ourselves. We need to learn how to become our own best supporter, not feel like we're our own worst enemy. And we're more similar than we are different.
Completely. And what does that support look like moving forward? I think you put more engagements with the foundation, and you'd spoken about there was some women from corporate with Televerde as well that you were doing some maybe one-to-one coaching on the horizon. So what does that sort of look like for you?
Yeah, so the way I love to work with companies, it's to, I'll backtrack for a second. We will never outperform our self-image. So the way that we see ourselves is the ceiling on our life. So if I see myself as a brave person, I will live a brave life. If I see myself as this was a very strong story I had for the longest time. If I see myself as an introverted person who's not that good at relating to people in groups, so will be as within, so without. So will be my life. And so when I work with companies, whether it's we're doing retreats, whether I'm doing a keynote, whether we're doing a series of workshops and then some one-on-one coaching with particular people, it's around that concept of how brave are you willing to be about who you get to believe that you are in the world? How much muck do we need to clear out so that you have more space to actually believe that that's possible for yourself? And then with the foundation, I think that I love the way that I was on a phone call with Emily, who works at the foundation last week, and she was saying how as they move into the new year, they throw a lot at the women in the program, and it forces friction. So it forces a little bit of overwhelm. It forces a little bit of, oh my goodness, I don't know how I'm quite going to cope. And something that my coach from Syracuse, where I played hockey, taught me is that we used to have these awful 20-hour training weeks, 4 hours a day. You would be there out in the field in the freezing cold in upstate New York, and she would say, I never want your match to be harder than your practice. I want you to practice. The practice should always be worse than the game. So we're going to practice when the stakes are lower, so that actually when you go out on match day, you're ready. And it was kind of a similar idea with the program that I'm helping with the foundation in the new year. It's you force a little bit of friction because you are supported. Everyone is here to help.
And you're all in the same situation, right? It's there's someone you can lean on for support.
Right. Yeah. So we're doing a bit of emotional resilience, stress management. I love talking about the nervous system and how we move into fight or flight or freeze or shut down depending on where we are in our body, and just learning how to speak your body's language, which is breath, finding a way to come back, being able to work with your mind when the emotions are bubbling up into your head and telling you some interesting stories, just that kind of thing. So helping them while they're learning a lot more skills like Excel and how to use technology, also just building up their self-image and ability to regulate their emotions too, which we all need more of that.
Definitely.
You can come back here.
Yeah.
Do a session was important. I'll keep doing with that towards the end of the year. Look, I'm super conscious of time.
What is the time?
Run over by 10 minutes. I don't know how many here. I mean, we just spoke for 30 minutes. Yeah. I was like,